Alright, so we're going to do a quick bike check of the Subrosa Malum 22 complete bike. This is the current 2020 model version. And I'm just going to go over some of the talking points that I liked about this bike because I was considering buying the kink whip for $440, but found this used online. But I'm going to try to talk about it for its retail price of $570. So obviously that's a bit more than the kink whip, but I'm going to go over some of the things that it has over the kink whip. Firstly, obviously it's a 22-inch BMX from the wheels, and the top tube is also exactly 22 inches in length. So ideal for tall people and ideal for dirt jumps and bull riding, faster riding. Probably not the best for street unless you're really tall, so tall that 20 inches just doesn't fit you. I will say that it doesn't feel that different. It feels a lot like a 20, but the advantages of the longer wheelbase and the longer top tube are very noticeable just in your manuals, especially if you're taller. I feel like I can get long and low and balance a bit better than feeling like I'm just way too much over my fork and whatnot. Let's go over some of the small details. The only thing I'll mention, I really don't have anything I don't like about the bike yet. The only nitpick that I could even possibly come up with is the orange hubs and headset cap just doesn't match to me. But, I mean, a color nitpick is like not even worth mentioning, essentially. Cool little headtube badge. I'm not a big headtube badge guy, but it's a cool little feature for a bike at this price point. Double gusset is amazing for bike at this price point, as well as the raw clear coat with the visible welds is that's so rad for a complete bike. Complete bikes 10-15 years ago did not look like this. I'm sure they wouldn't even show off the welds that they did on complete bikes 15 years ago. This is so rad. And if you don't know what these do, it should be kind of obvious. It strengthens the connection between these tubes and the head tube. Kind of operates like angle brackets on a table or something you're building woodworking. Just increases that strength. A really cool thing that I noticed on a bike at this price point, I love this. This tube is not round. It's ovalized. So dope. So it's not as wide, it's not round, and it comes to a point at the top and bottom. The most important bit being the bottom. So if you were to be grinding, typically for people doing grinds and coming down on it, but if you were to hit the down tube at any moment, it's just a lot more resistant to denting because it comes at a point, which makes it a bit stronger than if it was round. It's just easier for dents to cut in as much as possible. Oh, another cool thing, I'm sure this is like standard on most bikes now, but for me it's kind of new. Female front hub, so you can do your bolts out with your 6mm. Unfortunately the rear isn't, which would have been awesome because then you could do almost everything with the 6mm. But I mean, if you wanted to, you could just replace that wheel and get one, and you already have the front, so you're halfway there. What else did I? Oh, this is kind of cool. The like cold forged. Subrosa does a ton of little details on their bikes. Like, I don't usually care about details, but just the amount of little details that they did it's kind of hard to not mention. Even the bar end has the Subrosa logo. And one thing I do gotta say for this complete bike is this is the first complete bike I have ever seen that has grips that are really good. If I can kind of show you how tacky and soft they are. And a very cool mismatched pattern as opposed to just a long neck knockoff, so that just makes it so your hand really goes straight down. The only thing I don't like about long necks is, considering they're all vertical, usually your hand goes like left or right when you grip your bar. But when you do multi-direction, it just kind of squishes down straight. And the more you ride, the more it'll wear in the correct way. Oh, and then we'll show the little top cap. So many just little details. Love it. Awesome. And another good thing for the price is the interlock chain that it comes with, half link, Shadow's famous interlock chain. I'm generally not a fan of these because I don't do grinds, and I find that these engage very they engage very tight. I do a lot of pedaling, so I'd rather have a normal chain, and I'm probably eventually going to switch to a larger sprocket with a normal chain just so I can have that really clean fluid engagement. But I will say this has been really good so far. I just re-greased the drivetrain. I'm going to put that at the end of the video for anybody who wants to see tips on what you should do when you first buy a complete bike, and making sure your bolts are greased and tightened correctly. I do love these pedals. Again, I'm sure these are common these days, just normal plastic pedals, but they're so thin that you get tremendous feel through your shoe. You can just feel the spindle so much, and you can know exactly where your foot is. Feels great. I hate 8-spline cranks, but you know, what can you do? I'm not sure what the cheapest bike is that doesn't have 8 splines. Pivotal seat, I guess this is technically a complaint, but obviously pivotal seats have been a mainstay for so long. I would honestly rather have a railed seat, or everybody needs to jump on the stealth pivotal version. I hate putting an Allen through the top. Luckily, the seat is pretty good for a BMX seat. You don't feel the pivotal cutout in the middle, which always sucks if you get too thin a seat and then you have to feel that opening. But this one I can actually sit on, since again I pedal a lot. I'll ride all the way to the trails and stuff. I think the original owner did this. I'm assuming Subrosa did not do that. I'm probably going to replace that because in Los Angeles you don't have stuff like this when you have to lock your bike up outside. Not a good idea. And I wanted to show off, this will be hard to do, show off the hub noise. That is mighty loud for a complete bike, and sounds like it's very good engagement wise. All the complete bikes I remember ever getting, they sounded like they had free coasters. The pawls were so dingy and the engagement sounded so horrible. Yeah, this thing sounds like a proper hornet's nest when you're riding. So that's just some of the finer details of the bike. Like I said, the kink whip for $440 is probably the best retail bike for your money, but I definitely wouldn't blame anybody for going this. I mean, if you want 22, this is maybe one of the better options out of all the 22s. And then even if you get the 20-inch version, which this bike does come in, a 20-inch version, this is a great bike for some of the finer details. And if you plan to ride street and grind, that 20-inch version with the same ovalized down tube is going to be, you know, a reason to spend that extra money and get this bike over the others, as well as the chain, which is, yeah, you can easily put the chain on any other bike, and maybe the money works out even cheaper still, but it's nice to just have it dialed in from the get-go with the 25/9 and throw pegs on and start grinding without worrying about breaking a lesser chain. Alright, so it's going to be a while before I can really start riding and testing because my thumb is not healed yet. But stay tuned, and we're going to compare it to 20-inch BMX and compare it to mountain bikes on my local dirt jumps, and maybe we'll hit the skate park. Alright. Let's see. First of all, let's check the pedals and make sure that the original owner installed them correctly. On the left side, where does this pedal say? Well, first step is going to be finding out where it says on the pedal. Ooh, that one felt weird. Hopefully that was just some contaminants. Oh fuck, I don't have paper towels, do I? Shit. I'm gonna have to get an old t-shirt from the garage. So, oh, I can barely see that. Let's get a t-shirt and maybe a light. Okay, so this one was on this side. I need to clean it. Had a little bit of factory grease on, but oof, not much. And it almost looks like there's a tiny bit of thread damage, so let's double check this. Okay, this was the left side, so the pedal's wrong, correct. Alright, that's good news. Very good news. And we'll clean off. Oh man, I mean, maybe there was some factory grease on, but hardly any. Turn off this flashlight, and I think we will reinstall these right away so it's a bit easier to manipulate the cranks. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of grease on, and it should. I gotta spin the other way, or what? Oh, I should just do it from the Allen side. Okay, so we got a reverse here. There we go. And I have the bike flipped upside down, so always remember, if you're working on your bike upside down, that you're basically your right side is your left side is your right. And I'd like to tension that decently, especially with the grease on. And I think we did good on the grease. There's like almost no overflow. Huh, good. And this other pedal, I'm just gonna dab the thread into my grease container and get basically a small dollop on one side, so when it threads in, it will get into all the thread. Would appreciate not getting grease on my hands right now. Oh, damn it. I've got grease on my goddamn wrench. That is suboptimal. I'd rather have it on my wrench than my fucking hand. And let's get it tensioned decently enough. The last thread on this one felt weird. You might want to check that. We have a little bit of grease overlap to clean up, and make sure you do that because your grease is going to attract dirt, dust, and grime, and you don't want that near your threads, nor do you want it getting close to your bearings. Alright, so let's peep these 8 splines. Oh no, do they have thread lock on them? Oh, no thread lock, but very tight. Unfortunately, my right arm with my broken elbow can be pretty weak, sadly. And these definitely do not have a lot of factory grease on them, so if you get a new bike, and you know they usually come assembled with like the cranks already on, I recommend checking it for, you want it to have some factory grease, and if it has a little bit, I would ride it for a week or a month. That's fine, and then do this process. But unfortunately, if you buy it and you find out that there's basically no grease, it's bone dry in there, then you simply have to grease it right away. But I like to give it a week or month so it sets in, and you can find out if there's any issues with the bike on delivery. And then after a week or a month, you re-grease it. And since this is previously owned, I'm just going to do this right now. You can see the factory grease, sort of bluish. I mean, it could actually be the previous owner, but he didn't seem to ride it much, so I'm just going to be cautious and say he didn't do anything to the bike maintenance-wise. And this is simple. I'm just taking these out. I don't really have to check anything. You can see the crank's a little loose. So we're going to tighten first. It's kind of like your stem headset combo. You have to do it in a certain order. You want to compress the crank first to your spindle, and then do your pinch to get the crank extra tight as far as the splines go. You don't want to do it in the reverse order. I'm not sure how much of a bad effect it would have, but you always want to do your compression first, just in case something else ruins your ability to compress correctly. And of course, don't over tighten, because we are tightening into bearings, which means if you over tighten them, you will put stress on the bearings and they can blow out. So we'll do our compression bolt first on the spindle. What I like to say, at least for an adult, is give it your hand strength but not your arm strength. Tighten it down as much as your hand can, and don't start leaning into it with your shoulder and your body weight. And I've never had a problem, so there's no, you shouldn't need to get a torque wrench and look up any kind of specs or numbers. That's a little bit too much grease, but that's fine. I will put too much grease on these pinch bolts because I hate 8 splines. They just don't. Gotta use this side. They just don't. They don't stay right. Always creaking and squeaking and having issues. So if you do have these 8 splines on a complete bike that you just bought, a 48 will not have this pinch on the top. It'll just have the compression bolt. If you have these 8 splines, you really got to look after them and take care of them because they don't run very well, and they tend to, it's not even that they come loose, they just don't. They start to squeak and creak, and all you have to do to get rid of it is honestly take it out, re-grease it, and retighten it, and it goes away every time, at least in my experience. I don't know why that is, but it is the way it is. Let's flip the bike. And we are going to do the exact same thing on this side. Oh, that one's tight. Shit. Okay, the pinch is coming off nice. I would love to replace this sprocket with something bigger. It was a shorter ride today. I can't imagine doing a longer ride. It generally doesn't matter which order you take them off in, but I'm struggling with my compression bolt on this one. It's shit. So is that thread locks or? Well, that was thread locked for some reason. None of the other bolts were. Might have been something by the original owner, because usually factory will never ever thread lock something. Didn't necessarily look like it, but whatever. So, same process. Clean off the factory grease and any sort of residue from the thread lock. I think it dries when it gets in there. That's why it's able to lock it. And so when you break the thread lock compound, it can get flaky residue contaminants into your thread, which you never want. We'll clean our pinch. Oh, this one has like a lot of residue. Ironically, that's not the one I had issue with. Yeah, you always see this like tiny amount of blue thread lock from the factory, but it usually never works, so maybe I don't know. Maybe that was the first time it did. And I have a dollop of grease, and I'm going for my compression bolt. And I hope this solves my issue. I didn't want to do this right away necessarily. I was going to do it in like a week, but I went out for a test ride today and there was a slight knock in my pedaling. Oh, I hate these cranks. Alright. Feels good. Some grease on the pinch. Yeah, I couldn't tell what the knock was. A lot of times it's these plastic pedals with the unsealed bearings. Sometimes they'll make you think you have a problem with your drivetrain just because the unsealed bearings are kind of shit and move around while you're riding. But it didn't necessarily feel like that, so let's just tighten each pedal and each drivetrain bolt and see if the knock goes away on the next ride. And make sure you wipe excess grease so it's not attracting dirt into your drivetrain and threads. All right. So that's a good idea for buying a new stock bike. Make sure you put your pedals on the correct side. If your bike is flipped, make sure you don't make the mistake of realizing that it's opposite sides when you're working on your bike upside down. And check those drivetrain bolts, especially the pinch, because if you do experience weird noises like creaking and squeaking and you feel like something's wrong with your drivetrain, you might think it's your chain, but a lot of times it's literally just these pinch bolts, or this pinch bolt on this part just not being as tight as it could be, or not even being like in the right position, because you can tell how it comes together and is supposed to tighten onto the spindle. And man, if they come loose by just 1 little millimeter, they're annoying. Alright, she's ready to go.